as you're moving along with this, you remember exactly what that pattern should look like. Because after you cut these out, you're going to lose track of them pretty quickly. So this is now glued to a piece of paper, and I've already started. If you look at this, I'll do this the best I can here. There's a couple of different leaves on here. Some overlap the others. So you need to determine which part of your picture is going to be the one that you cut first. And that generally is the bottom part, or the leaf that's under, in this case, under everything else, which happens to be this kind of maroon one right here. That's going to be the first piece, first leaf I'm going to cut. Now this is going to be cut in two pieces. You can see there's the rib right on the leaf, and I'm going to cut out these two sections separately from each other. So to do that, I have to kind of project what that leaf would look like under this maple leaf here. So I just did a little quick pencil drawing, something to mirror from side to side. I'm going to need that. I'm going to have to cut this out. And then as we go and we layer these, the next cutting out will be on top of that with this in place. It'll make more sense as I go here. Any questions about this so far? See, also I've got a few little arrows on here. The neat thing about this is I can choose the wood and lay it out so my grain is running the way I want it to. So in this case, I'm going to have the grain running on this side of the leaf in this direction, and the grain running on this side of the leaf in the opposite direction. So that's going to give a little more life, a little more depth to that leaf. Just to show you what I mean, I have one here. It might be a little hard to see. I'll pass this around, but actually it's easier to see on this side. The grain on this side of this leaf is moving toward me, and the grain on this side of the leaf is moving away from me and up. So you get that three-dimensional look of that leaf on here. I do this stuff by hand. I don't use the scroll saw normally. I use a fret saw. This is a saw that I made myself. It's a copy of a 19th century Boston Sorrento fret saw. In the 19th century, fret sawing was big money. Everybody was doing it. It was everywhere. And this was one of the saws that was very popular at the time. Obviously, it's made out of wood. I mean, there's hundreds of different types of saws around. But I enjoy using this one specifically. I'm also going to use a couple different types of drills. This is a pump drill or an Archimedes drill. This has a 1/16 of an inch bit in it, and that's how I'm going to start the piercing of the hole. When I'm just starting these leaves, I'll be overlapping for the next cut, and I can just pierce this anywhere I want to, really. And my next cut is going to go over that, and it's going to remove it. The only piercing, the only hole that's going to ever be the problem is the very last one, because obviously you're not cutting over that one. You're going to see it. So for that one, I have a very fine, this is the smallest bit that I can use to pass that particular, this is a 00 fret saw blade. And this is the smallest diameter bit I can use. Yeah, Laura?
Do they ever telescope through the layers, the holes?
Telescope through the
Through the
layers.
layers?
Only the last one you're going to still see.
So
And
you never have a problem with your, okay.
no, because I'm cutting out all of them except that final one. That one's not going to get cut out. So that's why I save this one for the last one when I do that. A couple other things, a little bit of wax. This is just sealing wax to help lubricate the blade. Blue packing tape is going to be your best friend. And of course your pattern, this has been glued on. I use a glue stick, Elmer's glue sticks. And I just glue this on to this is my background piece. This is the piece that all the inlay is going to go into. You could have chose any piece of wood. I just chose the maple because it was kind of neutral. And I can do some really bright colors of wood on here that'll really pop. I like using, this is roughly 1/8 of an inch thick. That's the type of veneers that I use with this. You can use thicker, but then you got to work a little bit too hard for it. So 1/8 of an inch. And I have a variety of wood here. Leopard wood. This is bubinga, or I'm sorry, paduk. This is also paduk. Very different color of paduk, which is kind of cool because I could do a leaf, especially in the fall, a leaf with one half, and then the other half of the leaf would be the lighter color, and that would make a neat contrast. We've also got some mahogany. This is black limba. Various other pieces of mahogany, purple heart, cherry. What is that? That looks like ash. So just about any type of wood you want to work with, you can without too much trouble.
Is there a place you can buy that thin of wood?
Absolutely, right over there. Rockler has all, this is actually, everything I'm doing here was originally done in the store. All these cutouts was done in the store from Rockler material. So all of this stuff is from Rockler. Okay, so I'm gonna choose, cut out this part of the leaf, and I'm gonna start on this side of it so I can demonstrate how to cut over that piece. The only other thing I need is super glue and an accelerator, and I'll grab that when I'm ready for it. So I'm gonna take, which piece should I use? Let's start with a dark color. A lot of times you'll do the dark colors at the very bottom of the, and what I'm talking about, the bottom is background. So this leaf would be the darkest, this would be the next lightest, and this would be the lightest of them all, just so you get a 3D layering effect on this. So I'm going to choose one of my darker veneers to cut out this section right there. Let's go ahead and let's use the leopard wood to do that. Now, I also I've made an arrow. I talked about that. So instead of having the leopard wood go just up and down like this, I'm going to make sure it's on an angle for this inside part of that leaf. The other side, I'm going to angle it the other way so that you get that V shape coming off of that veneer. So I'm going to just eyeball this where I want it. Uh-oh. Turn that over. Hmm? And I'm going to just take some blue tape. And that's enough to hold it. Tape it on a couple different sides.
Chris, would this work with the saw you could buy from Rockler
We don't sell a fret saw.
at all?
No. And I'm severely disappointed about that.
Wow.
But they do have a scroll saw, which this technique will obviously work with as well. Okay, so I've got my wood taped on the back, the direction I want it to head. Now I just have to find out where I'm going to pierce this thing. Now, my second cut, my first cut, I'm gonna overlap. This is the mid-ridge. This is where I want to end up in the middle of that leaf. But my cut's gonna be on the waist side of that. So I'm actually gonna come over farther and cut in. My next cut on this leaf will be right at the midline. So that's gonna remove that cut. So I can pierce this leaf anywhere on that side of it. One other thing we're going to need, absolutely, this is called a fretting jack or a veneer jack. It's set on an angle. The way this works is that I'm not cutting this piece straight up and down. I've actually got this piece on an angle, and I'm holding my fret saw straight up and down, and I'm cutting it in a way that this bottom piece is slightly larger than the top piece is, so that, like a layer cake, this will fit up into this top piece when I'm done with it, and it should fit perfectly because I'm cutting them both out at the same time.
Do you have an angle of that?
Yes, it's that. No, roughly on a machine, if I'm doing this on the scroll saw, this is typically around 3 degrees. It depends on the thickness of the wood. It depends on the thickness of your blade. The best thing you can do is just experiment with it. This was actually a test piece to make sure that it fits in. If it goes through too far, say the bottom piece goes through the top one, your angle's not steep enough. It's too shallow. If it doesn't fit in or go in all the way, then your angle's too steep and you have to remove it. This, I think, is going to be roughly 7 degrees, and that seems to work best by hand. How do I know that? Thank you for asking. I have a little app on my phone. It's a clinometer. Looks something like that. And that's going to give me the angle. So I can set this, you won't be able to see it, but I can set this right on my jack, and it's at 7 degrees from horizon. So I know that's roughly where I want this to be.
It's hard.
Good. It is coming down. Okay. So I'm going to take my pattern, put it up on the jack, and you can see it on the jack. There's a whole bunch of little holes in it. This is my drilling jig as well. So I'll keep this on that angle, and I can drill. I'll start right here, and I'll drill, just keep my drill straight, and I can go right through both pieces at the same time.
So you're drilling on it.
Yes. Well, my drill is straight. The wood is on an angle.
Right.
So, when that's done, make sure it's easy enough to get through here. I'm not too worried about the size of this hole because it doesn't matter. The next cut's going to remove it. But I need to thread my scroll saw through it. Push that in. Oop. Come on now. Okay. I'm just going to get comfortable. Now, the other thing you have to be aware of is you're always going to be cutting in the same direction. In this case, since I'm tilted down to the left, I am going to be cutting clockwise. If I tilted it the other way, I'd have to cut counterclockwise. The piece on the bottom always needs to be a little bit larger than the piece on the top. And I put a little wax on here. A little more wax. Feel the saw starting to drag. A little more wax. Notice I'm not turning the saw. The saw is pretty much staying exactly where I have it all the time. I'm rotating the board, the piece of wood under it. When I need to do a point, I'm going to start putting back pressure on the blade and just pivot the wood in place. And that's going to help me cut a nice sharp point without wandering all over the place. So I got another little cut here. I need to pivot slowly, 90 degrees out this way. Sure.
When you said you take pressure on the blade, I think I understand what you mean, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not putting pressure forward. I'm pulling it back towards me. So actually the back of the blade is what's rubbing on the wood.
Gotcha.
And I'm really just basically drilling a very tiny little hole there.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And it's nice because honestly, unless this is something very specific, a picture, this happens to be a leaf, I don't need to be extremely accurate on my cutting. I'm trying to get it as accurate as I can, but it really doesn't matter. Because it's going to fit up there perfectly anyway.
Kind of resting it on the side of your shoulder, aren't you?
Yeah,
Support it.
I'm actually holding it like this. So I'm pivoting it with my hand, and it's sitting right on my elbow there, kind of. Inner elbow, is that a thing? Now I have a very sharp curve right here. So I'm going to put some wax on the blade, and I'm going to get it in there and just turn it, putting back pressure on the blade. Now this time I did get a little bit of a cutout, so. Now, as you can see, I'll stop it soon. Let me get up to this point of the leaf. What, Laura?
Do you ever use beeswax?
Yeah, I have a block of beeswax I use at home. I just grab whatever. This one lives on my workbench. Yeah, this is sealing wax. Any kind of lubricant, any wax will work. Now you can see from this picture, I'm cutting on my pencil line. And that's over the other leaf that's on top of it. So that's the part I had to draw in there. I mean, I don't even need to follow the leaf shape. I could actually cut all the way across this because that part's going to get removed in a later cutting.
I guess that's the part I thought, where you had to draw the fake leaf in there.
I just did it because plans change. I'll just cut right now. I'll just cut right across and back down again. And I'll continue. See, I just cut off part of that leaf because it's not going to matter. And continue this cut down. Now I'm cutting across now this leaf because you can see that leaf is on top of the one I'm cutting out. So that part of the leaf I'm cutting is going to be lost at a certain point anyway. So I really don't care what that looks like. I'm just going to finish this cut. And if it seems like you're starting to cut very, very hard, it probably means you're cutting into your jack there. So that tends to slow you down a little bit. And we're coming around to meet that where I started. And there it is. Take this off. Take that out. So you're going to have two pieces. This is the piece from the bottom, and this is the piece from the top. The top gets thrown away. You're not going to need that anymore. Take this off. And that'll drop right in. You might need to give it a bit of a tap in there.
And you drive that in from the backside.
Yeah. And that's going to come up and fit perfectly right where I needed it to be. So I would take that, glue it in, get some super glue, glue that in. I need to whack it a little bit more. It's not quite seating just the way I like it, which means that my angle's a little too tight. So I could go back and just take another degree or even a half a degree off of this.
Too small or too.
It's too much of an angle. It needs to be a little less of an angle.
So mid 7 should be 6?
6.5 maybe even. Chances are if you do that, you're going to come out too loose. So I'm going to keep it at 7 and just give it a good whack when I put the thing together. When I'm ready to glue it together, it'll fit in there once it's glued in. Now, that's why, of course, you look at this, and that's why you want to have a master, because I don't know what that yellow top leaf looks like anymore. When I want to cut that one out, I have to redraw it back on here again. And right over the part that I just cut out.
What about the one you threw away?
That one's meaningless right now. You could keep it, but
Put that back on?
not the piece of paper. I suppose if you use like that peel and stick stuff, contact adhesive, this is glued down here pretty well. I find it easiest just to then go ahead and freehand draw the second part on there. And if you have, this is on dark wood, so if you had like a white or yellow pencil or a white pencil, it's a leaf. You just got to get it close to what a leaf shape would be. And then you'd pick out your next piece and go from there. Once this one's glued in, I'd probably cut that second piece out, the second leaf. I could do half of this one. You see on the big leaf, if you noticed, that one's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different facets on that maple leaf. If you cut from each of these veins, say one side of the vein is this side and the other side is there. So you could have that grain running 8 different directions as it's fanning around that leaf. And that's going to give it that 3-dimensional value. Any questions with this? Yeah, Laura.
What happens when you're doing marquetry on an instrument that may have a curved, slightly curved top?
Then you really sweat.
So are you actually, you're actually working with the top of the instrument at some point?
At some point, yes, you are
Hold it
going
down.
to, if this was all done, say, and it was all cut in here, and I wanted to inlay this into an instrument, I would take either the top or the bottom piece of that. And just like I did here, this would be cut out underneath that, and I would just cut the whole thing out that way, and then fit my entire piece of marquetry into it.
So if you're doing a little bit of
Yeah, go ahead.
a little bit of a slightly curved.
Yep.
Conceivably, you could use a little bit thicker veneer, and then when you were finished inlaying and gluing, you hand plane or.
I'd rather use the same thickness of veneers and then plane or sand it down. I would put another piece on the back of it, a sacrificial piece of veneer, probably 1/16 of an inch or less,
Gotcha.
which is not uncommon under rosettes
Mhm.
for to be stiffened around the sound hole. And that's how I did the other one. Now that was a flat surface. So for a curved surface, you'd need to thin this out so you could slightly bend that
Oh,
into place. And it'll work.
okay.
I wouldn't suggest doing this on the top of an instrument that you were going to play. There's a massive amount of vibration on the top and it's under a great deal of stress. It probably would not last
If you
that
could do it on
long.
another part of
The back of it, the sides, anywhere else that's not getting stressed as much as the top would be.
So much for that.
I did the top of that one, that uke, because I doubt if it'll ever be played.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to do it. So there. Ken?
Didn't you, on every ukulele, you made a little logo inlay on top, correct?
That wasn't an inlay, that was a burn. I burned that with the laser. Oh, on mine?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the cat, right. Yes.
But the top of it is so thick, and you didn't go all the way
No,
through.
no, it's not.
Ah,
There's a peg head veneer on top of that. The peg head itself, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
is a certain thickness. But if you look at it, at the side of it, there's actually a thin piece of veneer glued onto
so the
that.
whole thing's been laminated
So
right on top.
I do the inlay first,
Yeah.
the marquetry and inlay, and then that gets glued onto the peg head.
Okay.
Yes. And you could do that corresponding wood or to give you a different look, or the same wood so it's very hard to see. And then you could bind it and then nobody ever know. and think you're really good at
Well, I
inlay.
thought you were a master with, I looked at that and said, wow.
You could do, I mean,
Yeah, okay.
this is just one way.
Let the secret out. There's the secret.
It's not so much of a
Just let
secret.
it, okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you were to lay it in a solid piece, you'd have to route out that.
Yes, you
that-
would.
that
You'd have to
entire
route
shape
that out.
inside very
And that's
carefully.
how a lot of times if you're doing the inlays on a fretboard, you see the square, the pyramidal shapes, those are routed in, and then those pieces are cut to fit and set in to that. So that's another way of doing an inlay as well. This is just one way of doing it. Could you do this with very thin veneer? Absolutely. And there's easy ways of doing that, but you have to deal with the kerf of that saw. That saw is removing a certain amount of material. This way you have that angle so it fits up seamlessly. When you're dealing with just a thin veneer, you have to make adjustments to that so you know that you're cutting out that piece and you're going to see a little kerf around it. Just the way it has to be if you're doing this technique. Yeah.
How did they make 300 years ago very thin, tiny saw blades that had teeth in them? How did they do it?
Very small files. Yeah. Well, they weren't this small. They weren't this small back in 300 years ago. It would have been a much coarser blade, something we would have considered more like a coping saw blade. But the technique's the same.
Yeah.
You're cutting it on an angle, it doesn't matter how thick the blade is, or you're cutting one piece at a time to fit. On if you remember, I showed you that spice chest with the peacock on it. That was a different form of inlay. All those parts for that peacock were actually cut into the solid wood. They were routed out, each piece. And then I used just blue tape, put it over that hole and used the edge of a pencil to mark that. And then that line showed up, peeled off the blue tape, put it on my piece of wood and cut that out. And then you shape that to fit into that inlay. That's more of an inlay than this is, which is a royal pain in the tuchus, let me tell you. Because every little piece has to be cut out one at a time individually.
It's like a mosaic.
Yeah, it is. And if you have any loose spots or anything, then you have to figure, well, do I cut them again? Do I do the old glue and sawdust trick? Do I get just super glue the whole thing to pieces and walk away from it? That's part of that technique. That's a much more intense technique than this is, I think.
What size was that hole?
God, what is this? This has to be, oh no, it's less than that. I'd say this is about a 32nd of an inch diameter. I couldn't tell you the number right off the bat. But that's my last one, my last hole that I'll use. So it's the smallest one out there. And then I could do a little sawdust in there or just leave the hole. It's a handmade thing. Nobody's going to notice that there's a tiny, tiny little hole in it. By the time you get done sanding this flush, it'll fill it up anyway, fill in all the cracks, and you're good to go. Hit it with a little shellac and off you go. Shellac's like glue. Any questions about that? Yeah.
A little bit about super glue when you're putting it in there.
Yes.
What thickness do you use?
I like to use a medium.
Okay.
But if this was a nice fitting piece that I didn't have to, I would use medium on this one. Put it all around the edges, and then press this piece into place. Give it a few taps, and then hit it with an accelerator, and that'll freeze it right into place. Right now, I can do that.
So you're not using the accelerator till you get it where it needs
Yeah,
to be.
I get it where I want it to be.
Don't use it early.
What do we got? And, come here, you.
Starbond has come out with a new product in super glues that is their medium thick, and it's 4 times stronger than the regular super glue, but it also is flexible. So when you were talking about some of the things of vibration and things, that would be a much better way to adhere something. Again, but you be careful putting the glue on and then putting it in. If you spray it and you'll seal the edges, it doesn't get underneath the wood, and now you super glue will just sit there. It's not using it as a glue, so you have to be somewhat judicious in how much you're using of this stuff. And yeah,
Now this happens to be thick because I didn't have any medium on hand. So I just went around all the edges. I'm going to just set this thing in place, trying not to glue myself to it at the same time. Hold it down into place.
so you do not put any underneath the flat surface.
No.
It's all on the edges. That solves that problem.
Yep. And as soon as that disappears, it's going to freeze that super glue into place.
Try not to use too much accelerator. It might
Yep.
turn it white.
Yes. I don't use that all the time, but you can see it's still a little bit proud of that surface. It's another thing I like with the 1/8 inch thick veneers. I have enough room to sand that back flush and still have enough meat left. Now, if I was inlaying this into something like a box top or something, I'd either, inlay it, route out an area for it and set it in, or you could actually put another backer on this and use this piece as your top. You just want to make sure that something's covering this back, because over time this can pop out. Yeah, Ken.
Do you know if that accelerator soaks into the wood?
No, it just affects the super glue
No.
itself. Right now you can see it's completely gone.
The super glue will, the accelerator will not.
Yeah.
So the accelerator does not get absorbed
It doesn't
into the wood.
saturate the wood. No, it lays on the surface and it dries. It just dries instantly, basically.
Like using alcohol.
Yeah.
It's gone. Can you use tight bond?
The glue? Oh yeah, absolutely. You can use glue if
Will it
it's a
swell
good
the
fitting
wood
joint.
If you don't
It
get it
will.
in there?
So you need to work a little quicker with that, and that's why I like the super glue, because it doesn't swell the wood as much as a tight bond will. But yeah, sometimes if it's a little looser fitting piece, I'll use tight bond, and that'll help the wood expand just enough to fit that piece, so you can't see the seams.
1 or 2.
I like to use one mostly, unless I'm doing something outdoors or like a birdhouse, then I'd use 3. I still like tight bond 1 for building instruments and things like that. It's reversible. It's good stuff, plenty strong. So
The big drawback to regular super glue is vibration or dropping or any kind of, it's brittle stuff.
yeah, it is.
And so if anything bends or anything, it's going to pop a joint. Whereas the new one is now much stronger.
And too much accelerator can weaken the bond too. So if you see it, if you notice, I put it on there. I held this down for a few seconds, let the super glue have a chance to start curing before I sprayed it with that. If you just follow the accelerator immediately, you'll see that white little foam show up. That is non-structural. It's just wasting the super glue, turning it to foam. So you try not to do that. And also, if you're using a lot of super glue at any one time in a big spot, make sure you're well ventilated. Don't ask me how I know that, because it's good stuff. Party time. Yep. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, Tom.
So, my question is, so the leaf overlaps. The
Yes.
leaves overlap. So just if you could briefly explain again how you would then start on one that's overlapping
Yeah.
with that one.
We can just grab a pencil here. I'll try to do that right up here by taking my master copy. I can just pretty much judge that where this comes around, and there's a little bit here, and it comes up to a point over here, and then back in and back onto that piece. This goes back down, and it comes in a little bit of a point right there, back around, and to another point here, come down, back up and in. So that's close enough for me. Right, and I know it's kind of hard to see on the dark wood, but there's my seam, or that's where the rib would be. So my next piece would be probably this entire part out of there at one time. And then I can come back and take a look at that again. Or let's see, oh no, it does. It actually does have a rib right through there. So that actually, I'd cut two pieces, one here, this side, and one on that side.
So you're cutting into the.
I'm cutting into the piece that I had just put in here. You do that a lot with this technique. You're constantly, that's why you need to start from the background and work your way up. The last piece should be the topmost or the frontmost piece that you're dealing with. So there is some planning involved. You need to have an idea of the sequence you're going to use for that as well.
You don't have to level off that first piece, do you?
No, I just leave it just like it is. If it was too much, I might come on the back and just sand this back flush, so my next piece isn't rocking anywhere. I want it to be quite a bit tight to this back piece. So this is standing out a little proud. I probably just real quickly with a sander flatten this out. The top you're not going to do until the very last part of it, when you're sanding it all out at one time.
Well, we bring it all to the same level.
Correct. Yep.
What are you gonna do with that when it's done?
I don't know.
Make a frame?
I might. I enjoy the process. I enjoy doing this. If we're slow at the store, I'll bring this out and I'll just sit here and I'll do marquetry, and people come watch, they talk, they ask questions. You know, it's all part of the Rockler experience. But it keeps me busy too. So
Is there any way to solve other problems that may occur other than throw it in the garbage?
the only real problem that could occur is these pieces don't fit properly. There's no way, if this piece was too big and it's not fitting up there, you just can't sand a little bit off the edges. It's just not going to work. And if it's too loose and it comes all the way through, that's again another problem. You can't make that piece bigger. I mean, so that's why it's always important to do a test piece first. Make sure you have this angle set within reason. You know, we might be a half a degree one way or another.
Does that tilt or anything?
Yep,
to
there's
change?
a little set screw. I have a thumb screw here, so yeah, I can tilt it back and forth both ways, and then lock it back into place. So I can. That was too much, so let me grab my
Right on the first page, too.
my clinometer. Come on now. Here we go. Come on now. It's at 9 degrees. I was at 7. So let's just loosen this up a little. There's 7.
You go to 6.
I can go to 6. There, 6 degrees. Now, if I wanted it 6.5, I don't get half degrees on this, but I could just do that, and that's probably a half a degree right there. And then I cut the next piece out and see what happens. Hopefully, it's going to be close. The next piece should fit perfectly, flush. If it doesn't, I can readjust this again. Sometimes, though, you just ended up chasing your tail, and it's best to just leave well enough alone. There's so many, you might be a little off on your sawing. It might not be perfectly perpendicular to the piece. And that'll help. That will throw all that off. So this is kind of like horseshoes and hand grenades. If it gets in there close enough, beat it with a hammer, stick it in there with glue, and walk away, and you're good. Mostly that's about all it needs.
How
Any
about
other-
finishing? Because you got so many mixed woods,
Mhm.
and you try not to change the
Colors too much.
to tone too much of them.
I'm becoming a really big fan of the hard wax oils like Rubio Monocoat, General Finishes, Osmo. Their pure oil product goes on very nicely, and it does a lot of protection. You wouldn't think so, but Rubio was designed for floors. That was made to protect flooring. So it is plenty tough enough once it's fully cured.
Chris, can you repeat the name of it?
Rubio Monocoat,
Monochrome?
Monocoat,
Monochrome.
or General Finishes has their own hard wax oils now too.
You guys carry those?
Yes, we do both of those. Yes, and there's 2 or 3 more we have, but they're basically the same product.
Are they making a glossy one now or not? You still got
They're Rubio's coming out with a glossy one.
Okay.
These are pretty. They're not dead flat, but it's more of a satin finish. I like them because they're almost foolproof. Wipe them on, let them sit, wipe it off, and you're done. So they're good stuff. But that's what I'd use for finishing. Now, anything else? We all good? Outstanding. Yeah, Bob?
You're doing it by hand. I've done a lot of cutting all with machine. Started with a couple of Delta. Those took like a tool to protect the jaws for the blades.
Yeah.
The DeWalt, like that for way over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's convenient, controls up front, cable tilts both ways, where a lot of the motors in the front and the side will only tilt one way.
Mm-hmm.
You got them right here.
Yep.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a good saw, no doubt about it. What happened with this one is this blade actually broke in this holder. So I lost about a 1/4 inch length on the blade. That's why I was having trouble getting it back together again. I didn't bring an extra blade, but I also I glued a hex key into that hex head screw, and that's what I use as a tightener now. I used to have another little thumb screw up there, but I just couldn't get enough tension on it. You need to really be able to crimp that down. This blade's had it too. When I was cutting, it was very dull.
Could you just grab it off the back?
Yes, I can, and I will. Believe me. Tomorrow, I'll refreshen my blades.
Chris, would that take a conventional scroll saw blade?
Yeah, regular scroll saw blades. Yep.
That's it's unbelievable what it will do.
Oh yeah, that's a good blade for this type of work. Any scroll saw. All right. Anyone else? All right. Let's take
Talk to you for a minute when
Sure.
you're done.
Let's take about a 15-minute break.